Thank you. The following is one of my voiceover demos. If you're a voiceover artist and you would like to advertise one of your demos on my podcast, please send an MP3 to thedrill12, all one word, at gmail.com. That's thedrill12 at gmail.com. Back in a minute.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Caesar's Palace for 12 rounds of boxing. In the red corner, from Los Angeles, California, wearing the red trunks with the gold trim, weighing in at 125 pounds, the lightweight champion of the world, Danny Little Red Lopez. Well, Bill, our winners get a home theater receiver. That's right. Experience the full potential of high-definition video with this 72-channel digital home theater receiver from Yamaha. But wait, that's not all. They also get a 5.1-channel surround sound system from Mirage. With 5 palm-sized speakers and a compact subwoofer cube, the MX 5.1 brings you huge immersive sound with Mirage's omnipolar technology. All from the Spiegel catalog, Chicago, Illinois, 60609. And they're taking closer order as down the stretch they come. Mr. Hot Stuff has 3 lengths to make up with chocolate candy last. On the rail, take the points behind that gallant son with chocolate candy gaining on the outside. In the lead is Pioneer of the Nile being tackled by chocolate candy. They're neck and neck as they come to the wire. And Pioneer of the Nile holds off chocolate candy and wins the Santa Anita Derby. And now, on your feet, time to greet holder of 14 NBA titles, your home team, your Los Angeles Lakers. Number 3 at 6'8", 5th year out of UCLA, playing forward, Trevor Ariza. Starting at center, number 17 at 7 feet, 4th year out of St. Andrews High School, Andrew Bynum. And at guard, number 24, 6'6", 13th season out of Loyal Marion High School, Kobe Bryant.
Just so you know, it's tougher for black people to believe in reincarnation. Because right now I can blame white people for slavery. You know, that's some fucked up shit you did back then. But just because I'm black now, doesn't mean I was black in my past. I could be who I'm angry at. I could have been a slave owner. That could be my statue I made them take down. And they say when you fuck up in your past life, when you come back, your next life is harder. So, as a former white person, I'd like to warn you new white that Black Lives Matter. You know what I'm saying? Because if they don't, you'll find out. You know what I'm saying? So no matter what race, nationality, black, white, Asian, Palestinian, or Jewish, be good to people because you don't know who you're going to come back to be. You know what I'm saying?
Good morning. It's Wednesday, Radical Wednesday, October the 9th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer and the patriotic song of the day, we will have the patriotic shorts, motivation, Bishop Barron, Ayn Rand, The 33 Strategies of War, and Rules for Radicals. All that and more when I get back. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I should not change, the courage to change the things I should, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Thank you. And now the headlines. Category 3 Hurricane Milton to make landfall in Florida. 5 killed after plane crashes on Catalina Island. 1-month-old baby dies after being bitten by dog in the city of Torrance. Dave Min signs vandalized with anti-Asian slurs in Huntington Beach. Meet Hank. At 92, he's now Disney's current longest-standing employee. Los Angeles firefighters in Florida to help with Milton response efforts. Texas teachers accused of giving young students sleep aid stickers. Woman struck and killed in Anaheim after DUI. Driver veers off road. 7-Eleven employee severely injured in Anaheim flash mob robbery. Driver killed when rock thrown through windshield in Antelope Valley. Hidden camera found in bushes outside Arcadia home. Sprint Halloween to transform some stores into a Christmas spin-off. No, Spirit Halloween. That's what it is. And that was the headlines for October the 9th. Back in a minute.
I miss it. I miss the Trump speeches. For real, though, it was my favorite speech I've ever seen a president give. It was the night the United States killed the leader of ISIS. Trump comes out of the Situation Room at like midnight in the White House, and he walks down that fucking tunnel like it gives a press conference, like he's giving a post-game NBA just killed a guy press conference. He walks up in front of the entire world at midnight and just goes, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi is dead. He died like a dog. I didn't change one word of that. That's what he opened with. And then he did 40 minutes. The speech is 40 minutes. For no reason. It wasn't a prepared speech. He freestyled 40 straight. Not even a speech. Just mean shit talk for 40. The meanest shit talk you've ever heard in front of the whole world. Abu, we could hear him crying. I said, Abu, don't cry. Let me tell you something. Abu cried. He cried quite a bit. I wouldn't have cried. Cry baby Baghdadi. That's what we were all calling it.
Thank you. And now the Patriotic Short.
On August 8, 2012 in Afghanistan, Captain Florent Groberg led a dismounted movement with several senior leaders. Approaching a compound, Captain Groberg noticed an individual walking close to the formation. When the individual abruptly turned towards them, he observed an abnormal bulge underneath the person's clothing. Captain Groberg selflessly placed himself in front of one of the brigade commanders and rushed forward, using his body to push the suspect away. He simultaneously ordered another member of the security detail to assist. Captain Groberg confirmed the bulge was a suicide vest, and disregarding his safety, he physically pushed the bomber away. The bomber fell and detonated the vest outside the formation, killing 4 members and wounding several others. The blast from the bomber caused a second, previously unnoticed suicide bomber's vest to detonate prematurely. Captain Groberg's action significantly minimized the impact of the coordinated attack on the formation, saving the lives of men in his unit and several senior leaders.
And that was the Patriotic Short. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, about 6 minutes of motivation.
When you start anything, to learn something new, to create a business, to become more in shape, the first step, the first day, the first minute, you're excited. You're like, yeah, I'm going to do this. The next day comes and you're like, man, this is a little tougher. And then you take another step and another step, and you end up admitting to yourself, this is pretty damn hard. The enthusiasm from the beginning of the process starts to fade out. You forgot why you started. All you could think about is that next grueling step, that next terrible workout, that next day at work that you just can't stand anymore. And you forget the purpose of why you started. And things become monotonous. They become hard. They become miserable. You become angry. You become frustrated. And guys, that is normal. Anytime you start something new, anytime you set out on a new path, anytime you move out of your comfort zone, you're going to go through a bell curve of frustration. You're going to be excited. You're going to be pumped. You're going to have the momentum to carry you through the first 2 or 3 or 4 days. Maybe it's a week. Maybe it's 3 weeks. But what happens when that energy fades? What happens when you start to get frustrated? What happens when you start to feel like a grind and things get grueling and they get gritty and they get tough and it gets harder to move through the process every single day? What happens then? Most people quit.
Do not accept that. Do not allow the process to break you. You embed that long-term goal into your brain, and every single day of your life, from here on out, you do something about it. However small or insignificant each step may seem, you take it, you make it happen.
The way in which you make massive progress is learning the art of becoming single-minded, learning how to concentrate, learning how to focus in. And you'll be surprised at the things that you're able to do when you learn how to block things out, when you learn how to keep thine eyes single.
Clarity is power. If you know exactly what it is you really want, what you desire, what you're really after, the more clear you are on specifically what you want, the faster your brain can get you there. Your brain's like a servo mechanism in a missile. It locks on the heat signature, what does it do? It moves and follows it. That's the way your brain is if it knows the outcome, if it knows the result. Well, I need to know the result and the after before I ever ask myself what to do. Stay focused on the target. The target is not the activity. The activity can change. It's what's the result I'm after. If you just keep looking at those outcomes every day, how am I doing on that outcome? Your brain will come up with ways to get to that outcome. I promise you. Focus on outcomes, not on activities.
You'll be surprised at the ideas that will come to you, of the opportunities that you'll be able to see. You'll begin to see things that have been staring there, looking you in the face, saying, I can't believe this has been here all this time.
If you're creative enough, can you find the answer, yes or no? If you're determined enough, can you find the breakthrough, yes or no? If you're passionate and loving enough, can you get someone to help you, yes or no? If there's no way that you're committed, can you find the money, even if you don't have it, yes or no? Creativity, decisiveness, passion, these are the ultimate human resources. And when you engage these resources, you can get any other resource on earth. And if you don't have what you want, stop telling yourself the story because you don't have the money or the time. That's bullshit. it's because you haven't committed yourself where you would burn your boats. If you want to take the fucking island, burn your fucking boats, and you will take the island, because people, when they're going to either die or succeed, tend to succeed.
And you've got to be so relentless, regardless of what comes down the pike, that you're always looking for a way to get over, always looking for a way that you can break through, always looking for a way that you can win, always looking for a way that you can strike a telling blow.
Wherever focus goes, energy flows.
If you focus on the obstacles, all you will see is obstacles. I can't get apart. I can't do this. Versus, I'm going to keep doing this. It's such a huge thing to convert things into the affirmative.
See, a lot of us, because of our limited vision of ourselves, a lot of us who begin to focus on problems and enable them to overwhelm us, we begin to think that we have no options. We begin to believe that there's no way out. There's always a way. Where there's a will, there's a way.
But many of you all over the place, and that's why you'll never be what you want to be. That's why you'll never have what you want to have. And I'm asking that the 24 hours in your life be very intentional, very deliberate, that you be very strategic. You're very deliberate about what time you wake up. You're very deliberate about what time you go to bed. You're very deliberate about what you eat. You're very deliberate about the people you bring in your life. You are very deliberate about the books that you read. You're very deliberate about what you watch on television. You are very, very focused, intentional, and deliberate. You go in the future and you see your future, baby. You look at it. You see where you want to be in 20 years, in 30 years, in 40 years. And then you come back to the present, to this particular day, to this particular spot. Get in the spot and you master today, and you don't worry about tomorrow, and you ain't tripping on your past. Why? Because your past don't count no more, and your future is so far ahead that you don't even need to be worried about that. You master the present. You master Monday, and then you take on Tuesday. And once you lick Tuesday, then you say Wednesday, come on. And then you take Thursday, and then you master Friday, and then you tell the weekend, bring it on. And when you get to the point where you start winning the day, then you start winning a week, and then you start winning a month, and then you start winning a year. Are you hearing what I'm saying? Go fast, go hard, and win the day. And if you can do that, you'll have, you'll be, and you'll do whatever you want to do.
And that was a little bit of motivation. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now about 5 minutes of meditation. And that was a little bit of meditation. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, the Daily Stoic.
What rules your ruling reason? How does your ruling reason manage itself? For in that is the key to everything. Whatever else remains, be it in the power of your choice or not, is but a corpse and smoke. Marcus Aurelius, Meditations, 12.33. The Roman satirist Juvenal is famous for this question. Quis custodiet ipsos custodes? Who watches the watchman? In a way, this is what Marcus is asking himself, and what you might ask yourself throughout the day. What influences the ruling reason that guides your life? This means an exploration of subjects like evolutionary biology, psychology, neurology, and even the subconscious, because these deeper forces shape even the most disciplined, rational minds. You can be the most patient person in the world, but if science shows we make poor decisions on an empty stomach, what good is all that patience? So don't stop at Stoicism, but explore the forces that drive and make Stoicism possible. Learn what underpins this philosophy you're studying, how the body and mind tick. Understand not only your ruling reason, the watchman, but whoever and whatever rules that too.
And that was the Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday. And now, Bishop Robert Barron.
Sometimes we in our sin feel exactly like the leper in Jesus' time. You know, the things that I've done, the addictions I have, or the relationships I've had, they keep me away from the Lord. It's as though when the Lord comes close, there's some instinct in me as a sinner that says, unclean, unclean. No, stay away from me. The very saddest things I'll hear when someone says, Father, look, I'm not even going to bother going to confession. The things I've done, there's no way the Lord will forgive me. I'm too far gone. My own unworthiness has turned me into a kind of leper. So people listening to me right now who feel exactly in that situation, I'm beyond hope. No one's beyond hope. Why? Because we're not relying on our accomplishments, not relying on my ability to turn my life around. That's not what Christianity is about at all. It's about opening oneself to the mercy that's coming our way. That Jesus has a special heart for those who feel like lepers. Let him in.
And that was Bishop Robert Barron. And now, the Ayn Rand thought of the day. Quote, would you be willing and able to act on the belief that altruism is a moral ideal? That you must sacrifice everything you love, seek, own, or desire, including your life, for the benefit of any and every stranger? Unquote. That's Ayn Rand, Philosophical Detection from the book Philosophy, Who Needs It? Back in a minute. Thank you. And now the 33 strategies of war.
Out of feelings of weakness and despair, combined with the conviction that the cause one stands for, whether public or personal, is worth both the inflicting and the suffering of any kind of damage. A world in which the faces of power are often large and apparently invulnerable only makes the strategy more appealing. In this sense, terrorism can become a kind of style, a mode of behavior that filters down into society itself.
And that was the 33 Strategies of War by Robert Greene. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, the bloody tourist himself, Stuart Varney.
See you again tomorrow. Morning Company picks it up now. Stu, take it away.
Let's do it. Good morning, Maria, and good morning, everyone. Milton is a Cat 4 storm. It's just hours away from Florida's Gulf Coast. Mass evacuations. Now, apart from the storm surge, there is grave concern over the debris left over from Helene. In 100-mile-an-hour winds, The debris becomes a mass of dangerous projectiles. There is also a political angle to the storm. The administration says criticism of their response is disinformation. An op-ed by J.D. Vance disagrees. He points out the administration was slow to respond to FEMA, and FEMA is short of money because some of its funds have been diverted to pay for the migrants. Meanwhile, Harris appeared for 3 very softball interviews. She drank beer with Stephen Colbert. She told Howard Stern her music choices and exercise routine. She received a rapturous reception on The View. It was another personal image polishing exercise. To the markets, a solid gain for stocks Tuesday. Many investors holding off this morning in anticipation of tomorrow's very important inflation numbers. The Dow off maybe 20, same with the Nasdaq. Minor losses across the board so far. Check out Google, as in Alphabet. The Department of Justice is seriously considering breaking it up because of its dominance in search. The administration is attacking America's crown jewels, the stock down just a fraction. Interest rates holding firm, the 10-year well above the 4% level, 4.03. The 2-year is just below 4%, you're at 3.97. Bitcoin, $62,000 a coin, 61.9 I should say. Oil, $74 per barrel, 73 now, it's gone down a bit. And gas, $3.20 for regular, diesel, $3.60. Gold again, shy of $2,700 an ounce, you're at $26.38. All right, on the show today, Donald Trump heads to Pennsylvania to outline more of his economic plan. He's also likely to weigh in on the government's handling of the hurricanes. J.D. Vance calls it incompetent. An Afghan national has been arrested. He's charged with plotting a terror attack on election day. He was let into the country on a special visa granted by the administration. And there is this, the early morning demolition of the Tropicana Hotel on the Vegas Strip. Built back in 1957, it was the home, some of the time, of the Rat Pack. Now a stadium will be built in its place, the new home of the A's. Wednesday, October 9th, 2024.
And non-profit news now. Because again, it's obscene. It is moral. It's a moral imperative that all news be delivered by non-profit sources, because otherwise we have the obscenity of people like Stuart Varney making profits for their company by reporting on other people's misery. Absolutely disgusting. Back in a minute. Thank you. If you're a Democrat, you should vote Republican and vote for Donald Trump. Why? Because Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now this is a little bit from an episode of Law and Order.
Must remain anonymous.
Your Honor, this report is the only record we could possibly have of one of the elements of the crime, namely intent. The court must put aside the fact that it takes the form of a medical report.
Well, how does this differ from any other medical communication, Mr. McCoy?
People v. Thomas, People v. Fonseca, People v. Gerhardt, in all those cases, the courts ruled that the state's right to learn if a defendant had AIDS outweighed his right to privacy.
Which is a basic constitutional right. In those cases, the crime was never in doubt. In this case, you're trashing the principles this country was founded on.
Okay, so again, if you hear him say that, he says that in these particular cases, and I might look them up just for fun, but in these particular cases, that the courts ruled that the state's right trumps the individual's right, but the state has no rights. There's nowhere in law, nowhere in the Constitution where the state has any rights. It just doesn't. That's why this case now all of a sudden becomes very convoluted, and what this becomes now judge-centric rather than law-centric. It should be easy. You find the facts of the case, you look at the law, and you make the decision. In this particular case, it should be, as the one attorney was saying, black letter law, that the state is not allowed to have this information. And that's it. The judge then should say, the law says that this is supposed to be kept private, and it wasn't. Therefore, you're not entitled to the information, period. But once we get into a situation where we have dueling rights, now everything gets complicated. Now the issue is going to be who is on the bench. Is it going to be a Republican who has a tendency to be individual rights oriented, or is it going to be a Democrat who has a tendency to be states' rights oriented? Back in a minute.
Or a statistic in a public.
Thank you. And now the prologue, about 30 minutes long, of Rules for Radicals.
Prologue. The revolutionary force today has two targets, moral as well as material. Its young protagonists are one moment reminiscent of the idealistic early Christians, yet they also urge violence and cry, "Burn the system down." They have no illusions about the system, but plenty of illusions about the way to change our world. It is to this point that I have written this book. These words are written in desperation, partly because it is what they do and will do that will give meaning to what I and the radicals of my generation have done with our lives. They are now the vanguard, and they had to start almost from scratch. Few of us survived the Joe McCarthy Holocaust of the early 1950s, and of those, there were even fewer whose understanding and insights had developed beyond the dialectical materialism of orthodox Marxism. My fellow radicals, who were supposed to pass on the torch of experience and insights to a new generation, just were not there. As the young looked at the society around them, it was all, in their words, materialistic, decadent, bourgeois in its values, bankrupt, and violent. Is it any wonder that they rejected us in toto? Today's generation is desperately trying to make some sense out of their lives and out of the world. Most of them are products of the middle class. They have rejected their materialistic backgrounds, the goal of a well-paid job, suburban home, automobile, country club membership, first-class travel, status, security, and everything that meant success to their parents. They have had it. They watched it lead their parents to tranquilizers, alcohol, long-term endurance marriages or divorces, high blood pressure, ulcers, frustration, and the disillusionment of the good life. They have seen the almost unbelievable idiocy of our political leadership. In the past, political leaders ranging from the mayors to governors to the White House were regarded with respect and almost reverence. Today, they are viewed with contempt. This negativism now extends to all institutions, from the police and the courts to the system itself. We are living in a world of mass media, which daily exposes society's innate hypocrisy, its contradictions, and the apparent failure of almost every facet of our social and political life. The young have seen their activist participatory democracy turn into its antithesis, nihilistic bombing and murder. The political panaceas of the past, such as the revolutions in Russia and China, have become the same old stuff under a different name. The search for freedom does not seem to have any road or destination. The young are inundated with a barrage of information and facts so overwhelming that the world has come to seem an utter bedlam, which has them spinning in a frenzy, looking for what man has always looked for from the beginning of time, a way of life that has some meaning or sense. A way of life means a certain degree of order, where things have some relationship and can be pieced together into a system that at least provides some clues to what life is about. Men have always yearned for, and sought direction by setting up religions, inventing political philosophies, creating scientific systems like Newton's, or formulating ideologies of various kinds. This is what is behind the common cliché, getting it all together, despite the realization that all values and factors are relative, fluid, and changing, and that it will be possible to get it all together only relatively. The elements will shift and move together just like the changing pattern in a turning kaleidoscope. In the past, the world, whether in its physical or intellectual terms, was much smaller, simpler, and more orderly. It inspired credibility. Today, everything is so complex as to be incomprehensible. What sense does it make for men to walk on the moon while other men are waiting on welfare lines, or in Vietnam killing and dying for a corrupt dictatorship in the name of freedom? These are the days when man has his hands on the sublime, while he is up to his hips in the muck of madness. The establishment, in many ways, is as suicidal as some of the far left, except that they are infinitely more destructive than the far left can ever be. The outcome of the hopelessness and despair is morbidity. There is a feeling of death hanging over the nation. Today's generation faces all this and says, I don't want to spend my life the way my family and their friends have. I want to do something, to create, to be me, to do my own thing, to live. The older generation doesn't understand, and worse, doesn't want to. I don't want to be just a piece of data to be fed into or a statistic in a public opinion poll, just a voter carrying a credit card. To the young, the world seems insane and falling apart. On the other side is the older generation, whose members are no less confused. If they are not as vocal or conscious, it may be because they can escape to a past when the world was simpler. They can still cling to the old values in the simple hope that everything will work out somehow, some way. That the younger generation will straighten out with the passing of time. Unable to come to grips with the world as it is, they retreat in any confrontation with the younger generation with that infuriating cliché. When you get older, you'll understand. One wonders at their reaction if some youngster were to reply, when you get younger, which will never be, then you'll understand. So of course, you'll never understand. Those of the older generation who claim a desire to understand say, when I talk to my kids or their friends, I'll say to them, look, I believe what you have to tell me is important, and I respect it. You call me a square and say that I'm not with it, or I don't know where it's at, or I don't know where the scene is, and all of the rest of the words you use, well, I'm going to agree with you. So suppose you tell me, what do you want? What do you mean when you say, I want to do my thing? What the hell is your thing? You say you want a better world. Like what? And don't tell me a world of peace and love and all the rest of that stuff, because people are people, as you will find out when you get older. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say anything about when you get older. I really do respect what you have to say. Now, why don't you answer me? Do you know what you want? Do you know what you're talking about? Why can't we get together? And that is what we call the generation gap. What the present generation wants is what all generations have always wanted. A meaning, a sense of what the world and life are, a chance to strive for some sort of order. If the young were now writing our Declaration of Independence, they would begin, when in the course of inhuman events, and their bill of particulars would range from Vietnam to our black, Chicano, and Puerto Rican ghettos, to the migrant workers, to Appalachia, to the hate, ignorance, disease, and starvation in the world. Such a bill of particulars would emphasize the absurdity of human affairs and the forlornness and emptiness the fearful loneliness that comes from not knowing if there is any meaning to our lives. When they talk of values, they're asking for a reason. They are searching for an answer, at least for a time, to man's greatest question. Why am I here? The young react to their chaotic world in different ways. Some panic and run, rationalizing that the system is going to collapse anyway of its own rot and corruption, and so they're copping out, going hippie or yippie, taking drugs, trying communes, anything to escape. Others went for pointless, sure loser confrontations, so that they could fortify their rationalization and say, well, we tried and did our part, and then they copped out too. Others, sick with guilt and not knowing where to turn or what to do, went berserk. These were the weathermen and their like. They took the grand cop-out, suicide. To these, I have nothing to say or give but pity, and in some cases, contempt, for such as those who leave their dead comrades and take off for Algeria or other points. What I have to say in this book is not the arrogance of unsolicited advice. It is the experience and counsel that so many young people have questioned me about through all-night sessions on hundreds of campuses in America. It is for those young radicals who are committed to the fight, committed to life. Remember, we are talking about revolution, not revelation. You can miss the target by shooting too high as well as too low. First, there are no rules for revolution any more than there are rules for love or rules for happiness. But there are rules for radicals who want to change their world. There are certain central concepts of action in human politics that operate regardless of the scene or the time. To know these is basic to a pragmatic attack on the system. These rules make the difference between being a realistic radical and being a rhetorical one, who uses the tired old words and slogans, calls the police pig, or white fascist racist, or motherfucker, and has so stereotyped himself that others react by saying, oh, he's one of those, and then promptly turn off. This failure of many of our younger activists to understand the art of communication has been disastrous. Even the most elementary grasp of the fundamental idea that one communicates within the experience of his audience and gives full respect to the other's values would have ruled out attacks on the American flag. The responsible organizer would have known that it is the establishment that has betrayed the flag, while the flag itself remains the glorious symbol of America's hopes and aspirations. And he would have conveyed this message to his audience. On another level of communication, humor is essential. For through humor, much is accepted that would have been rejected if presented seriously. This is a sad and lonely generation. It laughs too little, and this, too, is tragic. For the real radical, doing his thing is to do the social thing, for and with people. In a world where everything is so interrelated that one feels helpless to know where or how to grab hold and act, defeat sets in. For years, there have been people who found society too overwhelming and have withdrawn, concentrated on doing their own thing. Generally, we have put them into mental hospitals and diagnosed them as schizophrenics. If the real radical finds that having long hair sets up psychological barriers to communication and organization, he cuts his hair. If I were organizing in an Orthodox Jewish community, I would not walk in there eating a ham sandwich unless I wanted to be rejected so I could have an excuse to cop out. My thing, if I want to organize, is solid communication with the people in the community. Lacking communication, I am, in reality, silent. Throughout history, silence has been regarded as assent. In this case, assent to the system. As an organizer, I start from where the world is, as it is, not as I would like it to be. That we accept the world as it is does not in any sense weaken our desire to change it into what we believe it should be. It is necessary to begin where the world is if we are going to change it to what we think it should be. That means working in the system. There's another reason for working inside the system. Dostoevsky said that taking a new step is what people fear most. Any revolutionary change must be preceded by a passive, affirmative, non-challenging attitude toward change among the mass of our people. They must feel so frustrated, so defeated, so lost, so futureless in the prevailing system that they are willing to let go of the past and chance the future. This acceptance is the reformation essential to any revolution. To bring on this reformation requires that the organizer work inside the system, among not only the middle class, but the 40% of American families, more than 70 million people, whose incomes range from $5,000 to $10,000 a year. They cannot be dismissed by labeling them blue collar or hard hat. They will not continue to be relatively passive and slightly challenging. If we fail to communicate with them, if we don't encourage them to form alliances with us, they will move to the right. Maybe they will anyway, but let's not let it happen by default. Our youth are impatient with the preliminaries that are essential to purposeful action. Effective organization is thwarted by the desire for instant and dramatic change, or, as I have phrased it elsewhere, the demand for revelation rather than revolution. It's the kind of thing we see in playwriting. The first act introduces the characters and the plot. In the second act, the plot and characters are developed as the play strives to hold the audience's attention. In the final act, good and evil have their dramatic confrontation and resolution. The present generation wants to go right into the third act, skipping the first two, in which case there is no play. Nothing but confrontation for confrontation's sake. A flare-up and back to darkness. To build a powerful organization takes time. It is tedious, but that's the way the game is played. If you want to play and not just yell, "Kill the umpire." What is the alternative to working inside the system? A mess of rhetorical garbage about burn the system down. Yippee yells of do it or do your thing. What else? Bombs? Sniping? Silence when police are killed and screams of murdering fascist pigs when others are killed? Attacking and baiting the police. Public suicide. Power comes out of the barrel of a gun is an absurd rallying cry when the other side has all the guns. Lenin was a pragmatist. When he returned to what was then Petrograd from exile, he said that the Bolsheviks stood for getting power through the ballot, but would reconsider after they got the guns. Militant mouthings? Spouting quotes from Mao, Castro, and Che Guevara, which are as germane to our highly technological, computerized, cybernetic, nuclear-powered mass media society as a stagecoach on a jet runway at Kennedy Airport. Let us, in the name of radical pragmatism, not forget that in our system, with all its repressions, we can still speak out and denounce the administration, attack its policies, work to build an opposition political base. True, there is government harassment, but there still is that relative freedom to fight. I can attack my government, try to organize to change it. That's more than I can do in Moscow, Peking, or Havana. Remember the reaction of the Red Guard to the Cultural Revolution and the fate of the Chinese college students. Just a few of the violent episodes of bombings or a courtroom shootout that we have experienced here would have resulted in a sweeping purge and mass executions in Russia, China, or Cuba. Let's keep some perspective. We will start with the system, because there is no other place to start from except political lunacy. It is most important for those of us who want revolutionary change to understand that revolution must be preceded by reformation. To assume that a political revolution can survive without the supporting base of a popular reformation is to ask for the impossible in politics. Men don't like to step abruptly out of the security of familiar experience. They need a bridge to cross from their own experience to a new way. A revolutionary organizer must shake up the prevailing patterns of their lives, agitate, create disenchantment and discontent with the current values, to produce, if not a passion for change, at least a passive, affirmative, non-challenging climate. The revolution was effected before the war commenced, John Adams wrote. The revolution was in the hearts and minds of the people. This radical change in the principles, opinions, sentiments, and affections of the people was the real American Revolution. A revolution without a prior reformation would collapse, or become a totalitarian tyranny. A reformation means that masses of our people have reached the point of disillusionment with past ways and values. They don't know what will work, but they do know that the prevailing system is self-defeating, frustrating, and hopeless. They won't act for change, but won't strongly oppose those who do. The time is then ripe for revolution. Those who, for whatever combination of reasons, encourage the opposite of reformation become the unwitting allies of the far political right. Parts of the far left have gone so far in the political circle that they are now all but indistinguishable from the extreme right. It reminds me of the days when Hitler, new on the scene, was excused for his actions by humanitarians on the grounds of a paternal rejection and childhood trauma. When there are people who espouse the assassination of Senator Robert Kennedy, or the Tate murders, or the Marin County courthouse kidnapping and killings, or the University of Wisconsin bombing and killing as revolutionary acts, then we are dealing with people who are merely hiding psychosis behind a political mask. The masses of people recoil with horror and say, our way is bad, and we were willing to let it change, but certainly not for this murderous madness. No matter how bad things are now, they are better than that. So they begin to turn back. They regress into acceptance of a coming massive repression in the name of law and order. In the midst of the gassing and violence by the Chicago Police and National Guard during the 1968 Democratic Convention, many students asked me, "Do you still believe we should try to work inside our system?" These were students who had been with Eugene McCarthy in New Hampshire and followed him across the country. Some had been with Robert Kennedy when he was killed in Los Angeles. Many of the tears that were shed in Chicago were not from gas. "Mr. Alinsky, we fought in primary after primary, and the people voted no on Vietnam. Look at that convention. They're not paying any attention to the vote. Look at your police and the army. You still want us to work in the system?" It hurt me to see the American army with drawn bayonets advancing on American boys and girls. But the answer I gave the young radicals seemed to me the only realistic one. Do one of three things. 1. Go find a wailing wall and feel sorry for yourselves. 2. Go psycho and start bombing. But this will only swing people to the right. 3. Learn a lesson. Go home. Organize. Build power. And at the next convention, you be the delegates. Remember, once you organize people around something as commonly agreed upon as pollution, then an organized people is on the move. From there, it's a short and natural step to political pollution, to Pentagon pollution. It is not enough just to elect your candidates. You must keep the pressure on. Radicals should keep in mind Franklin D. Roosevelt's response to a reform delegation. Okay, you've convinced me. Now go on out and bring pressure on me. Action comes from keeping the heat on. No politician can sit on a hot issue if you make it hot enough. As for Vietnam, I would like to see our nation be the first in the history of man to publicly say, we were wrong. What we did was horrible. We got in and kept getting in, deeper and deeper, and at every step we invented new reasons for staying. We have paid part of the price in 44,000 dead Americans. There is nothing we can ever do to make it up to the people of Indochina or to our own people, but we will try. We believe that our world has come of age so that it is no longer a sign of weakness or defeat to abandon a childish pride and vanity, to admit we were wrong. Such an admission would shake up the foreign policy concepts of all nations and open the door to a new international order. This is our alternative to Vietnam. Anything else is the old makeshift patchwork. If this were to happen, Vietnam may even have been somewhat worth it. A final word on our system. The democratic ideal springs from the ideas of liberty, equality, majority rule through free elections, protection of the rights of minorities, and freedom to subscribe to multiple loyalties in matters of religion, economics, and politics, rather than to a total loyalty to the state. The spirit of democracy is the idea of importance and worth in the individual, and faith in the kind of world where the individual can achieve as much of his potential as possible. Great dangers always accompany great opportunities. The possibility of destruction is always implicit in the act of creation. Thus, the greatest enemy of individual freedom is the individual himself. From the beginning, the weakness as well as the strength of the democratic ideal has been the people. People cannot be free unless they are willing to sacrifice some of their interests to guarantee the freedom of others. The price of democracy is the ongoing pursuit of the common good by all of the people. 135 years ago, Tocqueville gravely warned that unless individual citizens were regularly involved in the action of governing themselves, self-government would pass from the scene. Quote, "It must not be forgotten that it is especially dangerous to enslave men in the minor details of life. For my own part, I should be inclined to think freedom less necessary in great things than in little ones, if it were possible to be secure of the one without possessing the other. Subjection in minor affairs breaks out every day and is felt by the whole community indiscriminately. It does not drive men to resistance, but it crosses them at every turn till they are led to surrender the exercise of their will. Thus, their spirit is gradually broken, and their character enervated, whereas that obedience, which is exacted on a few important but rare occasions, only exhibits servitude at certain intervals, and throws the burden of it upon a small number of men. It is vain to summon a people which has been rendered so dependent on the central power to choose from time to time the representatives of that power. This rare and brief exercise of their free choice, however important it may be, will not prevent them from gradually losing the faculties of thinking, feeling, and acting for themselves, and thus gradually falling below the level of humanity. Alexis de Tocqueville, Democracy in America. Citizen participation is the animating spirit and force in a society predicated on voluntarism. We are not here concerned with people who profess the democratic faith but yearn for the dark security of dependency, where they can be spared the burden of decisions. reluctant to grow up, or incapable of doing so, they want to remain children and be cared for by others. Those who can should be encouraged to grow. For the others, the fault lies not in the system, but in themselves. Here we are desperately concerned with the vast mass of our people who, thwarted through lack of interest or opportunity, or both, do not participate in the endless responsibilities of citizenship and are resigned to lives determined by others. To lose your identity as a citizen of democracy is but a step from losing your identity as a person. People react to this frustration by not acting at all. The separation of the people from the routine daily functions of citizenship is heartbreak in a democracy. It is a grave situation when a people resign their citizenship, or when a resident of a great city, though he may desire to take a hand, lacks the means to participate. That citizen sinks further into apathy, anonymity, and depersonalization. The result is that he comes to depend on public authority, and a state of civic sclerosis sets in. From time to time, there have been external enemies at our gates. There has always been the enemy within, the hidden and malignant inertia that foreshadows more certain destruction to our life and future than any nuclear warhead. There can be no darker or more devastating tragedy than the death of man's faith in himself and in his power to direct his future. I salute the present generation. Hang on to one of your most precious parts of youth, laughter. Don't lose it as many of you seem to have done. You need it. Together, we may find some of what we're looking for. Laughter, beauty, love, and the chance to create. Saul Alinsky.
And that was the prologue for Rules for Radicals by Saul Alinsky, a pragmatic primer for realistic radicals. Next week will be Chapter 1. Back in a minute. And I wanted to say, before we wrap this up, is normally what I've been doing the past couple of weeks is a book called Apollo. And I simply forgot. I got wrapped up in this idea, and so I will finish or pick up where we left off with Apollo, if not tomorrow or Friday, then definitely on Saturday. Now, back in a minute. Thank you. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there, and reminding you to trust yourself and trust your conscience.